Okay, so this is episode 66.
Yes.
We've got go on.
No, no, no. Just saying how are you?
I'm
It's
good. And
been
how are you?
quite all right. I think I'm basically just winding down after a uh, a night of scotch and cigars with an old friend. So
Oh, nice,
right.
nice. I have never tried a cigar. And while I would
Really.
never do it, yeah, while I would never do it regularly, I would like to
Hmm.
try one at some point.
Well,
Yeah.
it's not something you do too regularly. I mean, many certainly seem to, but it's something that really happens about a handful of times a year for me. Yeah, if at
Okay,
all. So,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I think for me probably once would do it, but I've never actually tried a cigarette, interestingly enough, and no great
Yeah.
desire to do so.
Gotcha.
I
Yeah.
did try a water pipe in Egypt, and I was slightly shocked to discover that I actually liked it. So that's the reason I've never done it again, because
That's true. Oh, right.
that
Yeah.
would be an unfortunate habit to pick up.
Hmm.
Yep,
Correct. Yeah. Moderation's key.
exactly. Got quite lucky in Egypt, actually. We were traveling independently, but we did happen to do one small thing with using a sort of a local guide, and afterwards he invited us to a private party.
Hmm.
Which I suppose maybe I should have been a little bit worried about going to a private party in a country,
Hmm.
where I don't know anybody.
Right.
But we went along. We were in our twenties and we went along and we had a great time.
Hmm.
And I got to try the water pipe. So there you go. It all worked out in the end.
Okay.
I'm still
That's
here
good.
I'm still here to tell the tale.
Right. All right. What we got today?
For the great men of history, I've actually got two. Occasionally, we do talk about more than one man, and this time it's the Montgolfier brothers. So we'll get onto them in a little bit. We're going
All
to
right.
talk about famous or infamous Australian feminist Clementine Ford,
Mhm.
Erin Pizzey. We're going to discuss. Talk a little bit about Misandry and talk about a new initiative called Grokipedia. And then, of course, finishing up with Zoe McLellan, who is still out there somewhere. So, I guess
Right.
I'll get started. Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it.
So, I'm going to talk about the Montgolfier brothers for Great Men of History. So, they are perhaps as you might gather from the name, French brothers. Are they Jacques-Étienne and Joseph-Michel? And they lived in the mid to late 18th century and came from a large and well-off French family. Apparently, one of them was the 12th, and the other was the 15th child. So this is kind of giving you the sort of an idea of the
Mm.
size of the family. So a lot of them were paper makers, which I think was obviously a trade, and I think based on this and the fact they were running a businesses, they were doing quite well. Anyway, these two brothers actually experimented with hot air balloons. So this is in the late 18th century. So do you remember, of course, and this is something that's often forgotten. We think about aircraft and we think about the Wright brothers and so forth, but people were already flying more than a century before that, right? It's just that the Wright brothers had the first heavier than air um, uh, device to fly the aircraft,
Right.
right? So the Montgolfier brothers were engaging, as I said, experimenting with hot air balloons. And in 1782, they did a series of unmanned hot air balloon tests, which were successful, including one where the lift was so strong it broke its mooring and actually took
Mm.
off. And then it crashed a couple of kilometers later when it ran out of fuel. But because you obviously need the fuel in order to cause the lift. So, it's an indication they were actually, to a certain extent, even underestimating the forces they were dealing with. So, on the 19th of September 1783, the first living things were lifted in a balloon. I think this is priceless. It was a sheep, a duck, and a rooster. Now, this may seem a bit random, but in actual fact, it wasn't. The sheep was believed to be somewhat human-like in terms of its likely responses, because remember, nobody knew what it was like very high in the sky. They weren't
Mm.
sure that you could lift a living being a few hundred meters and have it survive. But of course, obviously, uh, birds would fly, although not necessarily, many up 400 or 500 meters. But they would. The duck was actually there because it was believed that it would be more tolerant to the height. And the rooster, and they put the rooster in as well for similar reasons, being a flightless bird. So essentially, the duck was a control. Anyway, it was lifted to a height of 460 meters. I'm actually not sure how they measured that, given that maybe they had some sort of basic altimeter, because this was not tethered. Anyway, again, it came down and ran out of fuel. All three animals survived, giving an indication that humans might be able to survive at that altitude. And on the 15th of October, 1783, so I think this is kind of cool. They're moving a rate of around about one major experiment a month. Jacques-Étienne, one of the brothers, became the first human to be lifted in a balloon, but it was tethered to the ground. I think only went a few meters into the air. And then on the 21st of November 1783, so again a little bit over a month later, the first untethered human flight took place. And that was actually, well, it was neither of the Montgolfier brothers. It was an army officer and a scientist. And they went up to a distance of 910 meters, which is interesting because they've exceeded the distance they'd previously tested with animals. But I do find this really interesting in that they were actually effectively controlling the hot air balloon at this point. I guess they could control the flow of the energy pushing it up, and then they could go up and down that way. Uh, so anyway, yeah, interestingly enough, though, uh, decades earlier, a Portuguese priest, his name was Bartholomew de Gusmão, experimented with hot air balloons as well. And apparently, in the Portuguese-speaking world, it's quite common to claim he was the first, but there appears to be no evidence that he engaged in any animal or human trials. Perhaps being, decades earlier, the technology wasn't quite there yet. But anyway, so there were earlier people who were working on it, and people sort of were getting an idea this might work. But again, I think this is something that again, as I was alluding to earlier, that people have really forget about today. The fact that for nearly 120 years, or around 120 years before heavy than air flight, humans were going up in aircraft. It could look down upon things and could see, what something looks like from a great height. And I know the French actually did use it for military purposes as well. They would tether a balloon and send it up, and they could look at where enemy, military positions were and so forth. So I don't know if anybody had managed to shoot down a balloon at any point. I'm sure some people tried. But anyway, I think this is great because really they set the stage for people thinking about. Well, there were useful things that were done, but they set the stage for people thinking about the fact that humans could go into the sky. And then, it took them then 120 years for anyone to do it heavier than air, but they could prove that at least humans could go up there and survive.
Yeah. And that was a century before the Wright brothers, right?
Yes, exactly. About
Yeah.
120 years before. Exactly. That's right. Because 1903, 1904 were the Wright brothers. So um, anyway, yeah, I think that they're good ones to mention. And their father, interestingly enough, the King of France, because this was before the revolution, the King of France uh, actually granted their father a title, and I guess that was a way of granting both of the brothers who'd been involved in this, put them as part of that aristocratic family with the title.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, I think that meant everybody, all the other siblings, got a title or got to be considered to be from an aristocratic family as well, which is, I guess, pretty cool for them. But anyway, yeah. Uh, Dirigibles, of course, balloons were used even after planes became common. I mean, we know about the Hindenburg, of course,
Yeah.
but I think did I mention this on an earlier episode? There's essentially two gases. I know not everybody has an interest in chemistry, but there's two gases you can essentially use for a balloon: hydrogen and helium. Helium being extremely safe, and hydrogen being highly explosive. One would think you'd always use helium on the basis of that, even if hydrogen has a little bit of better lift. But not everybody had good access to it. From what I understand, I think may have mentioned this in an earlier episode. From what I understand, the United States had soon after this all happened, actually, and they realized that balloons were going to be important. The US went around the world securing helium supplies, and I think they pretty much had a monopoly on helium for much of the 19th century. And when the 20th century rolled around, and even into the 20th century, because when the 20th century rolled around and Nazis arose in Germany, the United States put an embargo on Nazi Germany, and one of the things they embargoed was helium. And their control of helium was so effective that this effectively meant Nazi Germany couldn't get helium for their hot air balloons.
Hmm.
And as a result, they used hydrogen, which of course is where you then get to the things like the Hindenburg disaster, where the Hindenburg was full of hydrogen. It wasn't that the Germans were morons and and used hydrogen when they should have used helium. It's that they
Right.
couldn't get any. So, and of course, the unfortunate thing about this, of course, is the Hindenburg disaster happened in the United States. Ironically, the country who was embargoing Nazi Germany on helium. Anyway, the Hindenburg disaster pretty much wiped out hot air balloons as a commercially for about a century. Even though, as long as you're using helium, they're perfectly safe.
Yeah.
So it's not like this disaster would have occurred. Would have been a more common thing around the world because almost everybody else was using helium. So it's a
Hmm.
bit unfortunate. I've long felt it was unfortunate that that it destroyed the hot air balloon industry in the manner that it did. I kind of feel, and I'm interested. I don't know, digressing
I
a little bit.
don't
I don't know how
recall
you.
you mentioning this thing. It's
Oh, okay. I thought we had mentioned. Okay, no
yeah.
worries. Um, I don't know how you feel about this actually, but I kind of feel the same thing happened to a certain extent with the Fukushima nuclear disaster. The countries like Germany cancelled their nuclear program afterwards, and
Hmm.
German and Japanese nuclear reactors were, completely different. There's a different culture around the nuclear reactors, different
Hmm.
designs, and so forth. It didn't seem to me to be a good idea for the Germans to cancel their react, and also too, they're in a completely different part of the world.
Of course,
Japan,
yeah.
Japan's obviously got a high risk of earthquakes and so forth. I don't think Germany has a particularly high risk of earthquakes. So
Yeah.
it always seemed odd to me that countries like Germany would cancel their nuclear programs on the basis of something that happened in a country with a completely different set of circumstances.
Hmm.
Anyway,
Yeah, yeah, that
reminds
is
me, yeah, it reminds me a little bit of this, where the Hindenburg disaster pretty much killed, helium-filled balloons, which makes no sense at all. And I guess that's the human factor, isn't
yeah.
it? There's an extremely high-profile, dramatic incident that
Hmm.
obviously does
Yeah.
cause loss of life, uh, and that sours people to the whole idea, even though it's
Yeah.
unlikely there would be a repeat. Anyway,
Hmm.
I just thought I'd mention that.
Yeah, it makes sense to me.
Yes.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
proclivity to panic.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly. That's
it's
right. That's something like something like that. Exactly. So, anyway, the Montpellier. I said this before the episode. I keep saying Montpellier. I don't know what Montgolfier is. What I mean to say.
Montgolfier.
Montgolfier brothers.
That's
I
right.
keep. I was before the episode. Like, do not say Montpellier. Do not. Anyway. So yeah, the
But you know what you're talking
Montgolfier
about,
brothers.
folks. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So yes. So that's all I really wanted to say on them. I think that their contributions to flight are not widely recognized today. When I'm talking about the great men of history, I'm trying in general to pick people who are not as well known. I have had a few very
Yeah.
well known people in there, but more often than not, I'll try to pick someone who isn't as well known and try to raise
Mm.
their profile a little bit.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, the Montgolfier brothers, I think, did very, very well, and
Right.
yeah, gave the world
Right.
an amazing.
Exactly. And by the way, before we go to the next one, let's get the crowd to kind of submit their own ideas for great men of history every so often, and we'll
I love it.
consider them. You know?
Let's
Yeah.
exactly. We can't promise
Mhm.
we'll use them, but let's
Mhm.
do that. 100%.
Yeah,
Yes,
sure. Like,
exactly.
send them
Uh,
over.
uh,
You know how to contact us. I think.
exactly,
And you can just leave them in the comments section as well.
exactly.
So,
Yeah, because otherwise it just falls to me to come
yeah.
up with one
Well,
each time.
I'll try and submit some as well.
No worries. That's cool. I mean, I've kind of taken the lead on that segment, so that's all good. But yeah, no, happy if you
Yes.
want to submit names as well.
All righty.
So next one on the list is Clementine Ford, who, as I
Mhm.
mentioned, is well-known and famous or infamous um,
Deranged
Australian
idiot. Yeah.
feminist.
Yeah.
So we've spoken about her a lot over the time. There's various things have happened. There was a present. This is what I was going to talk about specifically, but just to give by way of sort of a bit of background. Some years ago, I don't recall how many now. Do have it on Wiki for Men. There was an incident where she was presenting at a school, and she was being quite. She was being her usual self, and she refused to take questions from the boys in the audience. She was only taking questions from the girls. And interestingly enough, it was reported by a number of people who were present. The girls staged a walkout. So there were a lot of the girls were really really upset at this and just got up and walked
Really?
out of the yeah. So interesting, and I think it shows that a lot of the boys are afraid to be quite open about
Hmm.
calling out misandry. That doesn't mean they don't have a problem with it. It doesn't mean they're not going to do something about it, but how they respond to it is quite different. As I said, by and large, a lot of men just disengage and just walk away, and you won't even hear from them. We'll tell you about it, but most of the men won't. They'll just disappear, right? Um, and these boys are obviously just keeping low, afraid that they'd be punished if they walked out. But a lot of the girls, obviously confident that they wouldn't be punished, walked
Right.
out. So,
Yeah.
yeah. But no, I really, I think that's great. I love the girls for doing that. So, and
Mhm.
for having the awareness to do it as well.
Yeah.
But that's actually not what I wanted to talk about. So, Clementine Ford, anyway, just so that you know, there's been a lot. We've talked about it, and she's been in the news a lot over the years. Interestingly enough, though, a few years ago, I don't recall, and before this episode, I didn't check the dates on any of this. So, just going from memory, a few years ago, she did announce that she wouldn't be taking the same position in social media, in that she would not be as openly aggressive with people and so forth. And I have to say, to some extent, that has been true. She's largely she's it used to be that she was every month or two there was something she was saying something outrageous, and we'd be seeing her. That's largely gone. However, I do want to talk about an exception, and it was good enough to get her kicked off Facebook.
Hmm.
So. Uh, she made a number of negative comments recently on Facebook. So I don't know if this was be some sort of return, but they apparently her Facebook and I think also her Instagram account were deleted as a result of this. Uh, she mocked Erica Kirk, of course, the
Of
wife.
course. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. So. And which is, of course, is highly inappropriate, regardless of what you may think of her husband. She's now a widow, and she shouldn't be mocked in that manner. And she also said something interesting on Instagram, and I think this may have contributed to having her account deleted as well. She said reportedly, almost every freedom you have has been won through political violence. Well, I would take issue with the statement, actually, but in
Right.
some cases, I think political violence has actually slowed down reform, because moderates don't want to be associated with the extremists, and they
Yeah.
sometimes have to take a step back from the reforms. And I think
Hmm.
that I can give you plenty of examples around the world where I think that's the case, where I
Hmm.
think even extreme feminists slowed down some additional rights that were given to women in the early 20th century, like suffrage and so forth, because moderates didn't want to deal with it, didn't want to be associated with these people. And anyway, but aside from that, I think this comment is very worrying. She's effectively endorsing political violence, and political violence to me is something that has to be wholly rejected, even small scale political violence.
Right.
In
I've got
Australia,
a
for
lot to
example,
say about that once you're done with your
right?
point. So, yeah.
Yeah. In just when a few years ago in Australia, there was an egg was thrown
Mm.
at a politician, and there was a debate about whether it was political violence. Now, my position is it is political violence. It's certainly at the lower end of political violence, but it's
Mm.
still political violence. I think also a milkshake was thrown at Nigel Farage more recently, actually, same sort of thing.
Okay.
So it's low end political violence, but the
Mhm.
problem is, I think that it's a slippery slope, and when you start tolerating low end political violence, you get something more serious.
Yeah.
Anyway, political violence will ultimately threaten the system, and while democracy is flawed, um, it's better than any other system that we've come up with so far. What was Winston Churchill's attributed to saying, uh, um, democracy is the worst form of government except for all of the others. I think there's some question about whether he actually said that. But he did say something along those lines.
Yeah.
And I tend to agree with that statement. It's certainly got its flaws, but all of the other systems are worse.
Right.
Um, oh yes, and just one last point before, and
Yeah.
definitely love to hear
Mhm.
your thoughts on political violence. Apparently, she's going to start her own social media platform. So I have to say, I'm looking forward to seeing that and seeing what comes of that. Maybe she doesn't realize just what a big deal that is to actually launch a social media platform.
Hmm.
There is existing software. Maybe she can use that.
Hmm.
But I have to say that if she does, I'm likely to join because it'll be an absolute quote gold mine. So so I won't be saying much on there, but I will certainly be listening and recording some of the and taking
Are
screenshots and so forth of quotes.
are you
So
going to be doing some subterfuge or something, or are you going to
well,
be
I'll be
just
open. I'll be there under my own name. I'll be there under
okay?
my own
Okay.
name. As
Hmm.
I always do everything under my own name online.
Hmm.
And something I've done since I first got online way back in 1992.
Hmm.
And I will absolutely be taking notes.
Hmm.
Yeah, I will be interested to see what comes of this claim that she's going to launch her
Hmm.
own social media platform.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I had to say on Clementine.
Yeah, sure. Well, so this idea that almost every freedom you have has been won through political violence. Well, now there's a problem with that because the idea of freedom is only pure when spread as an idea. So it's strictly through persuasion, and the working towards that is where freedom actually gets. See, implementing is a bad word for this one because you don't implement freedom. We have freedom, you just need to recognize it and claim it uh, and basically make the declarations for it and work towards it. We kind of sort of discover what we have and codify it, and nothing gives us freedom, right? Now, and as far so I'm assuming she's trying to appeal to the Revolutionary War and that kind of stuff, and saying and probably making implying that that's like political violence that we want our freedoms for, but it's so. The political violence part was the ones that wanted to kind of suppress the freedoms, and we try to defend ourselves in turn.
Yes,
So it's
that's
not
a good
political
point. That is
violence.
political
Yeah,
violence. Yeah, yeah, that's right. What the British were doing was indeed political violence. Correct.
that yeah, right, right. So
Mm.
political violence only suppresses freedom. So you don't win your freedom using political violence per se. It's a self-defense is a necessary thing that we have
Mm.
to do, which is not in it. So to preserve it, to prevent from losing it, it's really um, I know it's convenient for someone like Clementine Ford to complain that you don't get to kill somebody who's just speaking his mind. We just witnessed freedom being suppressed. Freedom of speech being suppressed on live uh, uh, video, and she thinks that this is about it's good to have political violence. So if my point was well taken here, it's not a matter of uh, freedom to use political violence, but we have to kind of defend against political violence as a
Quite
matter
right.
of yeah.
That's a really good point. Also, too, I want to clarify with the use of
Mhm.
the word violence, and I know people disagree on this, and on this particular point, is self-defense a form of violence? When I use the term violence, there's normally an implicit exclusion for self-defense. Obviously, it is a violent self-defense inherently contains violent
Yeah.
acts, but
Hmm.
if I'm using the word violence, I'm implicitly excluding self-defense,
Hmm.
and some people do that, and some people don't. So, unfortunately, it's
Hmm.
necessary to clarify. But yes. I think
Hmm.
that's a real. You made a very good point there. That effectively
Hmm.
that's right. In that case, it was the British authorities who
Hmm.
were taxing
Right.
Americans
Hmm.
without giving them representation in the
Hmm.
Parliament in
Right.
London. And I think that they were actually quite right
Right.
to
Yeah.
take issue with that.
Right.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, it's one thing that I've seen the left do a lot. They deplore the idea that you have to defend yourself, and they kind of use violence in that. They complain about violence in that case.
Yeah.
But now they're here supporting violence when it's used in a very aggressor type of situation.
Yeah.
And the thing about self-defense really is about defending yourself and the ones you're protecting first. The any kind of violence that happens is what may be an unfortunate situation, even though it does happen. The idea is that you value those you're protecting, including yourself, more than your assailant, and it's the assailant's fault, in effect, that he would have to put himself in a position where he has to be disposed for it. So I wonder if that made any sense at all, but
Yeah, I think so. But if anyone has
yeah,
any questions, you
yeah,
can always post them in the comments. Yeah.
right. Okay, and that's really what I had to say.
Yes.
And
So
as
I'm glad
far,
we
yeah,
actually
go
discussed
ahead.
political violence even briefly, but go on.
Yeah, yeah, of course, yeah. And as far as this new social media site that Clem here is trying to say, so this could either be like a hub of people just wishing political violence, and therefore is something that people should have an eye on for violence that's brewing, I suppose. Like I guess this will be the place to kind of seek it out before it happens, maybe. They're certainly giving themselves away potentially. But also this could turn out to be another B4 situation in which it becomes a nothing burger. And
That's right.
but
Quite
we
possibly.
should definitely look into it because we don't want to forget it. We're gonna shove
I'm
it in their
looking.
face.
I'm excited to see what comes
Yeah.
of this. So I did want to make one final point, actually,
Mhm.
and that is freedom of speech. So Clementine Ford had her account deleted from Facebook and Instagram. I don't agree with her having her account deleted, since I'm nearly a free speech absolutist. The only speech that I believe should be suppressed is explicit calls to violence, and even saying her statement about freedoms comes short of that, I think.
Mhm.
But anyway, and some of the other things, while
Yeah.
offensive. So the point I'm making, but I want to clarify something, and this
Mhm.
relates to why I'll be on this other platform if it ever comes about. There are essentially two reasons why I disagree with this. Firstly, I'm nearly a free speech absolutist, right? So obviously, from that perspective, I obviously do not want her speech to be impinged, because you have to allow people you don't agree with to speak, or you're not really supporting free speech.
Right.
But more importantly, or at least I should say equally importantly, in the case of feminists and misandrists and so forth, the last thing I want to do is silence them, okay?
Mhm.
Because I'm making a point that even if I wasn't a free speech absolute, nearly a free speech absolutist, right? These people are making statements, and I'm trying to point to everybody, look, they keep making these statements, right? They say these things, they think these things, they hate men, right? If we silence them, then there'd be no evidence. That's the last thing I want to do,
Mhm.
right? I want them to
Right.
say these things so that I can screenshot them and get the links and archive the links and
Mhm.
publish it, right? Even
Right.
if I wasn't a free speech, nearly a free speech absolutist, I would still want her to not be banned from Facebook, because I want her to say the things that are on her mind
Mhm.
so that I can prove that she believes them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I
So
agree.
I just wanted to make that point. Yes, this is
Mhm.
this is a point I often make, because people sometimes don't believe. I've had people suggest to me that I don't online, and even sometimes in person, that they don't believe me when I say I actually want to let these people speak. I absolutely do, and I'm just telling you the reasons.
Well,
There are
yeah.
two of them.
Why wouldn't they
Yeah.
believe that? So.
Oh, because they themselves are interested in shutting down. I suspect
Mhm.
my view is they themselves are interested in shutting down speech they don't agree with, and they
Okay.
can't conceive that I would want to do something different. That's been my
Mhm.
understanding based on
Okay.
talking to these people.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So okay, so I guess I don't really have much more to say on Clementine Ford. As I said, she we have talked about it quite a lot. There's Wiki for Men article. There's so many things she's been involved with over the years. It's anyway.
Mhm.
I'm sure we'll be hearing from her again, with or without the new social media platform. We'll have to see how that turns out.
Yeah.
So, if you don't have anything else on free speech, political violence, or Clementine Ford,
Nope. I'm good.
the next topic I have is Erin Pizzey.
Mhm.
So, Erin invented the domestic violence shelter. I'll give a little bit of background for those. I think a lot of our listeners and viewers will know her, but I want to give a little bit of background anyway.
Mhm.
So, Erin invented the domestic violence shelter in the 1970s in the UK. She initially opened a women's shelter, and but she went about it in a really smart way. Once she brought in the women into the first shelter, she started rather than just housing them, which I think a lot of the modern shelters do. They don't really do any sort of investigation. She actually started interviewing them and trying to look at commonality of experience and so forth, and try to get an idea what was driving the domestic and intimate partner violence, so forth. And she very quickly realized that a lot of the women who were in the shelter were themselves violent. They would openly admit this. Okay, so they were quite happy to admit this, and I'm sure a lot of them were sorry about it and so forth. But they admitted that that they were also violent. They weren't denying that their partners were violent, but they were also violent. And we now call this reciprocal partner violence. There's a few different names. So I usually say reciprocal partner violence. And Erin started to realize, she was really among the first people to start to realize that a lot of this intimate partner violence was reciprocal. That each partner was both a victim of it and a perpetrator. Now, just to give you an idea, that means at different times. So, on Tuesday, maybe she's hitting him, and on Wednesday, he's hitting her. And of course, there's this problem where they tend to bear each other up as well, and which increases the incidence of violence. So because they're both being aggressive, it tends to pick up. And one of the things that they found with research, I'm not talking specifically about Erin's research now, but more recent research that's happened over the decades, is that they found that the incidence of injuries is greater for in reciprocal violence, right? Which obviously would come from this idea that the two partners are sort of flaring each other up. But the difference for women is greater than the difference for men. Okay, so effectively, in reciprocal partner violence, women are more likely to suffer a significant injury compared to non-reciprocal violence than for men. Men are also more likely to suffer a significant injury, but the difference isn't nearly as great. And I suspect this probably makes sense. It's a fairly obvious conclusion now that we've got it, insofar as women have less dense bones and so forth, and are more prone to injury. They're more prone to injury in traffic accidents too, for example, for a variety of reasons. But so I think it makes sense. But I've made the point over the last 10 to 15 years or so that even if somebody only cared about women, they should still care about reciprocal violence, partner violence, because of this problem, because of the fact that women are the ones who are more likely to be severely injured. The chance increases when it's reciprocal. If you only cared about women, you should still think, well, we should stop the reciprocal violence.
Uh-huh.
But the models used by the many major feminist domestic violence organisations all view it as male violence being perpetrated on women. They must necessarily reject reciprocal violence, even though by rejecting it, they're ultimately making it more like, because they end up influencing police forces and so forth. They ultimately leave women more likely to be injured in intimate partner violence by doing this. So I think this is the ultimate proof that they don't really care. They certainly don't want to stop it, because they don't want the gravy train to stop. But they don't really care about women either, because if they did, they would necessarily recognise the problem in reciprocal partner violence and seek to stop it. They don't. They refuse to talk about it. Anyway, that's a bit of an aside. But Erin, as I said, soon after starting the first women's shelter, she started to realise that reciprocal violence. She started to think about creating a men's shelter, and this is when there were other women in her organisation at this point, and this is when she's ultimately forced out. There was harassment going on. She left the UK. I won't go into a lot of details because it's been well documented online, but she left the UK for a number of years as a result of the harassment and against her and her family. Anyway, the organisation that she started still exists. It's called Refuge, and it is the largest domestic violence organisation or shelter organisation in the United Kingdom. And a few years ago, and now, if you dig, at least as of a couple of years ago when I last checked, you could find Erin's name on the website. For a long time, you couldn't even find her name on the website,
Mm.
but at some point, a new CEO came in and they did very, very quietly add her name as the founder, right? Um, but I don't know if it's still there. I should check actually. But it was, as of a couple of years ago, it was there. But about a few years ago, the 50th anniversary of the organization happened. Prince Charles and Camilla were there. Okay, this is the UK, obviously.
Yeah.
So, and uh, Erin was not invited
Mm.
to the, even though she was around, she was mobile, she could have gone. They didn't invite her. So while there may be a small reference on the website, that's as far as it goes. When it comes
Mm.
to the 50th anniversary, they just refused to invite her, which I think is really quite sad. But anyway, Erin's had obviously recognised reciprocal partner violence, so thus recognised violence against men in
Mm.
relationships as well as women. She was actively involved with a Voice for Men for many, many
Mm.
years,
Right.
and continues to be a strong supporter. I've personally known her for about 13 years. I spoke to her on the phone for the first time around about 13 years ago,
Mm.
and since then I've kept in touch with her. And
So,
I mean, we don't speak often, but we from time to time we do talk.
yeah.
And of course, when I was in London in 2016, I had the opportunity to meet her in person,
Yeah.
which was really lovely. So
Yeah. I never knew I don't know her. I never got a chance to actually know her. But I think we
yeah,
should
at this
talk
point
about
you
good.
yeah, so at this point, you pretty much have to go to the UK, I think.
Yeah, right.
So yes, so that's right. So that was the background, and now we get
Mhm.
to talk about what happened over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So I woke up one morning. I'm here in Australia, so things are happening in the UK and the US and so forth. Often when I'm asleep during
Hmm.
the day over there, and I woke up to see a report that Erin had passed away. Now Erin's 86, and it didn't seem, although sad, it didn't necessarily surprise me.
Yeah.
Um, and so I posted it, and I got a message a private message from someone almost immediately
Mhm.
saying that it was a mistake and that Erin
Yeah.
had not actually passed away.
Mhm.
So I immediately retracted or edited my statement to make it clear.
Mhm. Yeah.
Over the following day or two, I saw other people doing the same thing, posting the
Mhm.
report that Erin had passed away, and then I would actually contact them, and I think it's settled down now, but anyway, it seems to there've been a lot of reports of celebrities and so forth passing away in order to draw clicks in recent years. It doesn't appear that that was what happened here. It looks like what happened was, Mike Buchanan, who's a friend of mine who runs
Good.
Justice for Men and Boys, he he received an email or someone within the organization received an email from a family member, and he published some of that information. So based on that, what appears to have happened was that a family member made a post on Facebook or something that was a bit ambiguously worded, and from that, some people misunderstood and thought that she had passed away and
So,
posted
yeah.
it, and that's when it all started.
Right.
And again, Aaron's 86, so I guess
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
but the more nuanced bit of information is that she is undergoing end of life.
That's right, exactly.
Is that
So
right?
the information, as I understand it, is that she is in end of life care, or
Hmm.
what we would describe. I don't know if you'd use this word. We call it palliative care, and I don't know if that's just a word
That's
that
no,
you've
that's a
heard that.
familiar term for me.
Okay, yeah, cool. Because I've noted in the UK they report it as end of life, but yeah, I'd say palliative care. So
Hmm.
and it's just care around making someone comfortable, and
Gotcha.
yeah. So. Anyway, apparently, at least as of the last report I saw, Erin didn't know that this had happened. I don't know if anyone's told her since, but
Hmm.
um,
Yeah,
yeah, we'll just
well,
wait and see what happens at this point.
yeah, and honestly, everything kind of looks kind of ambiguous, more ambiguous still because we keep on seeing RIP Erin and Pizzey and a retraction, and we see some more. So it's kind of hard to tell if there's been an update since then.
Exactly,
So I
exactly.
can't really. And even Google says that she has a death date,
Yeah,
but I don't
fourth
even
of
know if this is truthful at all. So.
Google's reporting the 4th of October 2025,
Mhm.
which is definitely wrong. That
Got it.
was the
Yeah.
date. That was the date at which it was initially reported she passed away.
Mhm.
Now, this appears to have occurred. I think where Google got it from is the Telegraph in the UK published
Hmm.
an obituary, but they realised their mistake pretty quickly and retracted it. If you go search on
Hmm.
Google, you can actually still see references. At least as of a couple of days ago, you could see
Okay.
references to the obituary, but the obituary itself is gone. I think
Right.
that something in Google had picked up this date, and
Hmm.
it's not really going away. So yeah, so if you and people have presented it to me, a couple of people on Facebook when I pointed out that this was not the case, used this as evidence that she had in fact passed away. I didn't bother responding
Hmm.
to them. So
Yeah.
anyway, within a yeah, I think I haven't seen any reports myself within the last 2 or 3 days, but it sounds like you have. Anyway, yeah, hopefully it'll all get cleared up. But then, of course, yeah, then we'll have to wait to see, yeah, obviously what happens over the
Yeah. Yeah.
coming time. So
Yeah. In any case, best wishes. You know,
exactly.
to,
So the best information I have is that as of today, Erin is still with us.
yeah.
And yeah, that's the last I've heard as of a few days ago. So
Hmm.
yeah. Um, but anyway, yeah. So and um, well, we did mention this at the time, I think, but Erin is actually commander of the British Empire, which is a
Hmm.
huge endorsement of her work. So I think she did, at least late in life, got the credit that she should have had decades ago.
Hmm.
That's really a big deal. I don't think maybe people, perhaps who aren't familiar with the British honor system, I don't realize what a big deal
Hmm.
that is.
Hmm.
An award in the British honor system called the OBE, which is very well known, Order of the British Empire.
Hmm.
The CBE, the Commander of the British Empire, is a step up from that. Getting an
Hmm.
OBE would have been amazing. Getting a CBE is just out of this world. It's just extraordinary that's a huge recognition of her life's work.
Hmm.
Meaning that in the end, someone somewhere in government, in influential circles, recognised what
Yeah.
she'd done. So they're not just one person. I mean, groups of people have recognised
Hmm.
it. So that's fantastic, and a sign, probably a sign of things to come. The fact that it was a CBE, I just really can't. To even now, I'm just amazed that she got a CBE.
Yeah.
If she got an OBE, I would have been impressed. Or, but to get a CBE,
Hmm.
I'm absolutely stunned. It's that big of a deal.
Yeah.
So yeah. Um, Anyway, so yes, so Erin, yeah, a great figure, finally getting some recognition
Yes.
that she should have had decades ago. So we've got two more topics to talk about. Misandry, I'm going to be doing regular discussions on misandry.
Hmm.
So I just wanted to talk a little bit about casual misandry. So this is a term I use. It's the first time I heard. Well, the first time I heard. Sorry, the first term I heard for this phenomenon that I'll get to.
Hmm.
Some people call it everyday misandry, but I still prefer the term casual misandry. Maybe that's just
Hmm.
because that's the first way I heard it. Anyway,
Yeah.
casual misandry differs from other forms of misandry in that it's not in and of itself, it's not a big deal in that it doesn't immediately hurt anybody, but it does contribute to uh, problems more broadly because when you
Hmm.
start piling the stuff on, and
Hmm.
I've collected a list and I'll go through some of the lists
Yeah.
now, but for casual misandry, yeah, it's not that it will specifically. It's not saying like Julie Bindel or something lock men up again. Julie Bindel has never explained who would actually enforce this, but anyway, she
Yeah.
wants men locked in camps,
Hmm.
but or some of the or some feminists, Simone de Beauvoir, who said I think it was who said
Hmm.
men should be reduced to 10% of the population. There've been other
I don't know if it was her. Was it actually her?
yeah, it may not have
No,
been
no.
Simone. Simone. Yes, it was. It
Okay.
wasn't. It was. She said some other terrible things. Thank
Yeah,
you.
right, yeah, yeah.
Uh, Let me see if I can do. As I said it, I was a bit suspicious. Maybe that wasn't the
Right.
case.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The
Uh,
name's not popping in my head right now because well,
exactly.
I have an
It,
excuse. It's the morning, so
there was there was a recent woman who got quite popular, who was briefly quite popular, who
Mhm.
said this as well. But there was a major feminist figure who said this a few
Mhm.
decades ago.
Oh yeah,
Yes, I don't think it
exactly.
was
Yeah,
Simone. So.
yeah.
Um, Anyway, the casual misandry, uh, yes, is lower level than that, but still, when it adds up, and it tends to try to attack men's self-esteem and so forth.
Hmm.
And I think some men, I tend to suspect that a proportion of men buy into this nonsense. I have a gut feeling it's somewhere around 30%. I don't have any really hard data, reading, just from reading comments by men and so forth. I've long believed that somewhere around 30% of men kind of buy into this stuff. And I think there's another 30% who don't buy into it and are just and absolutely reject it. A lot of those men probably go on to be MGTOW. And then I
Yeah.
suspect there's about another 40% who either haven't noticed or just let it wash off their back. So my guess is, and I have no basis for claiming these hard numbers, but it's just a gut feeling that around 60% of men sort of respond to this stuff or react to it, but in different ways. And about 40% probably just don't even worry about it, which I think is itself is a problem. I think
Hmm.
because these things are a problem. Anyway, so we have casual misandry, men are genetically inferior. I've written about this stuff quite a bit actually because I think that it underlies more serious problems, and I focus quite a bit on this stuff and on historical the historical feminist narrative because a lot of the justifications for attacks on men come from this historical narrative. But men are genetically inferior. That may seem like a strange one, but it's usually some sort of misunderstanding about the Y chromosome. I think may have talked about this previously. There was a discussion that the Y chromosome was eventually going to disappear. We're talking about something like 125 million
It's
years.
a yeah, it's a familiar kind of thing that's told to
Yeah,
us.
exactly. And it pops up periodically. And the argument was that the Y chromosome would disappear at some point and men would disappear with it. This is nonsense. For a start, the uh, the actual degradation of the Y chromosome, so-called degradation of the Y chromosome, has been shown to be slowing and has essentially nearly stopped. I think about 5 million years ago, it completely stopped. And uh, it's not so much a degradation as it appears to be an optimization, actually, because it appears that the Y chromosome was shedding unnecessary genes to the point where he was left only with the genes that were necessary to create maleness, essentially. So it appears before that, older versions of the Y chromosome appeared to have other genes that were unrelated to maleness, and it made more sense for these genes to either weren't needed, or it made more sense for them to be on another chromosome. And through a process called transposition, they would end up on another chromosome, and the Y chromosome would throw them away. It didn't need them anymore. But the ones that were necessary for maleness have remained. And also, too, the Y chromosome has no partner. In all the other chromosomes have a partner, another copy of their own gene, which they can
Yeah.
essentially use as a check. The Y
Hmm.
chromosome has no partner. But I've read, and any geneticists out there, feel free to jump in and correct me. From what I've read, though, it appears to be self-correcting. That it has a mechanism where it is able to detect, I think maybe a second copy or something, and it has this is what I read some years ago, and it's able to correct, which is one of the reasons why it doesn't degrade in the manner that was predicted. But aside from all that, even if the Y chromosome did disappear, which is not beyond the realms of possibility, because chromosomes do sometimes disappear, right?
Hmm.
That would not cause men to disappear.
Right.
Either maleness to disappear, either some other chromosome would take up the mantle of being the sex-selecting chromosome,
Hmm.
or whatever descendants of humanity existed at that time would have used a different mechanism to sex select because there are quite a few there are different mechanisms that exist in nature. So the Y chromosome, the end of the Y chromosome does not mean the end of maleness, and the fact that so many people in the mass media and the mainstream media were willing to write articles to make these claims that the Y chromosome was disappearing, that would be the end of men, and they were quite happy to put that in a title, was the misandry. It's nonsense, absolute nonsense, and shows it's a fundamental misunderstanding of genetics. But they were quite happy to do it because it was a mechanism to put men down.
Right.
Um, Men have lower pain thresholds, so this is one I've written about this stuff quite a bit. This is a claim that's been going on for a while. The argument was that women endure childbirth and therefore must have higher pain thresholds. Research showed this actually not to be the case. And feel free to jump in any point there, by the way.
Sure. Of course.
Otherwise, I'm just yeah. So what they found is that women in late stage pregnancy tend to develop quite a high pain threshold. So essentially,
Yeah.
nature has accommodated this problem by giving them a high pain threshold when they need it for childbirth, but that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean they maintain it for the rest of their lives. In actual fact, the research tends to show that in general, and there have been arguments, there may be a couple of counterexamples, but in general, women have lower pain thresholds than men. And this is interesting because many people in the medical fraternity have believed this idea that women had higher pain thresholds. And there's an argument that they've actually been over medicating men and under medicating women because they were believing this claim that was not based on any sort of solid data at all.
Uh,
So doctors were essentially adjusting thresholds to accommodate this, even though it was nonsense. So I think in the last 5 to 10 years, when this better data has come out, I think that started to change. But
mm,
you see from that, and you see from this is another example, really, of misandry, or treating it as saying that men are inferior for this reason. Women aren't benefiting from this either. In fact, women were suffering because they were being under medicated, right?
right. Yeah.
So even if you, again, going back to what I said about domestic violence, even if you only cared about women, this does not help women. It actually makes things worse for them, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh yes, just there are various others like men and boys are stupid. I mean, there've been various T-shirt lines that have said things like
Of
that.
course.
The
Yeah.
original one,
Yeah.
"Boys are stupid, throw rocks at them," came from
Yeah.
David and Goliath. Yep.
Hmm.
Men are linear thinkers, which is a really interesting one. It's again, it's a fairly baseless claim, but I think I'll go into some of these in more detail in future episodes.
Yeah.
But
Sure.
I just wanted to quickly go over our list. Men can't multitask, but women can. So this is
Yeah.
a really interesting one. So essentially, research shows that nobody can actually multitask, and that anybody who tries just destroys their own productivity. Uh, the idea, I mean, they're also too, multitasking is not well defined by people who make this
Yeah.
claim.
Hmm.
Multitasking is a concept that comes from computers, and this humans, even to the extent that we can, don't multitask the way the computers multitask. So
Hmm.
yeah. So there is something called continuous partial attention, where humans can maintain attention on multiple concepts at once. It's
Hmm.
quite cognitively taxing, and there's no evidence to suggest that either gender is better at it than the other.
Hmm.
Continuous partial attention, I think, is the other term used. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, generally speaking, it's just a pathway to lack of productivity. So
Right.
don't
Yeah.
do it. As an aside, I want to mention at this point how many computer and device interfaces we have that seem to delight in interrupting people. Decades of research shows if you want to make people productive, don't interrupt them. And yet we
Hmm.
seem to have built interface after interface, which is designed to interrupt people. My my computer interface that I'm currently at is heavily optimized by myself. I run Linux. It's heavily optimized even by the standards of Linux. The entire thing is designed to not interrupt me.
Hmm.
Okay. So I've built this over decades. Most of the work was decades ago, and I've just enjoyed it since then. But the entire thing is tuned to prevent me being interrupted
Hmm.
while I'm working on the computer. And it just absolutely boggles my mind, as an aside now, boggles my mind that most people are putting up with so many interruptions when they're trying to work. Anyway,
Hmm.
so I think tell the people who are designing computer interfaces for commercial use to start thinking about the actual research and
Hmm.
start incorporating that into the actual research so people
Yeah.
aren't being interrupted.
I wonder if this is
Um,
something that we can kind of incorporate into computer ethics, or at least the development of
yes,
it.
yes.
Yeah.
Well, there's an area called human computer interaction where they actually
Mm.
study how humans use devices, and
Mm.
they pointed this stuff out decades ago, right?
Mm.
But most of their research gets ignored by the people who actually develop interfaces. Absolutely
Mm.
extraordinary. Um, Men can't maintain attentiveness as well as women. This is a really interesting one. So yes, I'll go into more detail on these later on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So men think about sex every few seconds. This is really interesting. They found that both men and women, on average, think about sex a few times a day. The idea that men think about sex every 7 seconds is just nonsense.
Mm.
Uh, some researchers claim that men think about sex more often than women. Again, as I've said previously, I have my suspicions that even if that's true, the difference isn't nearly as true as a lot of people think it is.
Yeah.
There's a topic for another one. I know we've talked about doing this. I want to really get my ducks in a row with that argument and present it. So that'll be
Hmm.
another episode.
Right.
Men have fragile egos. This is a classic one. This one goes against
That's
all the data.
that's yeah, yeah. Say your piece on that one. I got something to say
Yeah,
about that one. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. So there's plenty of evidence, for example, that particularly young women suffer
Mm,
a lot more from negative social negativity and so
hmm.
forth,
Right.
and also suffer from more from stress. Um,
Mm,
that's throughout their lives. Women on average suffer more from stress than men. That's
hmm.
something that's come out, particularly in the last 10 years. This idea that men have fragile egos is utter nonsense. It's just ridiculous. I don't know. I'll be interested. I'll probably just hand that one over to you because all I can keep saying is this is complete nonsense. Anyway,
Well, yeah, yeah, exactly.
go
Because
for it.
yeah. So it's funny this relationship with the idea of the ego in society because we're always talking about trying to destroy it or make it nothing in order to be accepted into like some kind of status of decency or something like that, or some kind of social acceptance. But the problem is this. At the end of the day, despite all the psychobabble kind of surrounding it, the ego at the end of the day is a representation of yourself. It really kind of is yourself at the end of the day, and your sense of it. It's so when we talk about things like ego inflation, what's the actual problem here? Is it that it needs to be inflated because it is small, or is it just the fact that it's big in general? See, they don't even define it. So the problem is, um, you should have a healthy ego, not no ego. Um,
Okay.
because that's a more objective way of viewing yourself and more confidence in yourself. And small ego is more so the problem because you don't have anything to stand up for, and you don't have any kind of claims to make of yourself, and you got no self of your own to call yourself. You have no self-ownership. So, and to have no ego is even more insidious because you're a blank slate. You've got everybody's hands in your head and in your heart, kind of influencing you like a puppet. And and worse yet, you might become a bit of a insidious parasitic figure trying to feed off everybody else's ideas and maybe manipulate them as well. So I know this is kind of
Yeah.
off center, but it's the way I feel about
No,
the ego. Yeah, and it's a
ego
really
is
sh
important.
right, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. So
Sorry. And
I would warn everybody from people advocating ego death because that's a scam. It means,
yeah,
become something that we can adjust, become something that is fit to our needs, and that's the really big thing here. Now, of course, be objective about your ego, of course, and
yes,
and uh, be sure to back yourself up, but because that's the truth of the matter. But so yeah, fragile ego is kind of it's a way to kind of mock men for having an ego, and to hope to destroy said fragile ego, supposedly fragile ego. So
yeah.
so, so yeah, it's a nonsense idea.
Yeah, and I have to say it's one of the ones I'm not hearing as much now. There are a few on this list, but I want to make it clear we record everything, right? We record this stuff, and we're going to remember. So, but it is one of the ones I will say that we don't hear as I don't hear as much, which is good. Some casual misandry has declined in recent years, I think, but it's still there. But some of these which is interesting. Like the next one I'm getting to, I think is in the same category too. So
Yeah.
men complain unduly when sick, aka man flu. So this one's really interesting. Um, the claim is that men complain a lot more when they're sick and sort of collapse at a minor illness. Uh, Research shows that women actually take significantly more sick leave from employment than men do.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
this is true. This is true even when excluding child care. They were comparing childless men and women. So even when looking at childless men and women, this was still true. Although childcare did account for some of it, women were still taking significantly more sick leave than men. I have a hypothesis about this actually. So there is some evidence to suggest that when men get sick, they are sick for longer, but don't have as many symptoms. And I have a hypothesis as to why this may be true. So I'm thinking back to hunter-gatherer society. What it seems to have been the case is that women would tend to this is the reference to hunter-gathering. People would often just join in where they were needed, but there were distinction in roles that men were more likely to be hunting and women were more likely to be out gathering. And gathering would more likely leave the woman probably less than a day's walk from the camp, right?
Mhm.
From their camp. Whereas men were often on multi-day journeys. And my hypothesis is that uh, men evolved an immune system which caused them to have less overt physical symptoms of an illness, but but I guess the trade-off for that is they would take longer for them to get rid of the illness. And I think this may occur because could you imagine a situation where you've got a dozen or 2 dozen guys and they're out on a hunting trip and they're out for a few days or even a couple of weeks, and some guy comes down with the flu, right?
Yeah.
He can't just walk back to camp for a day, and you can't have your hunting party sitting around for 2 weeks, or or even sitting around for a week while he gets better or something.
Mhm.
So I think men evolved an immune response where they would maintain, they would be ill, but they would be able to stay on their feet essentially and be able to hunt even if they weren't feeling well and be able to survive. I think this was an evolutionary adaptation to be able to survive to get back to camp. And then the men who got so sick they couldn't move probably died when they were out on a hunting mission. So I suspect this is why we do see this phenomenon where some people have tried to claim this is a variation of this as well, where the male immune system is inferior because men, do not take long to get over an illness. But again, I don't think nature doesn't see it that way. Nature's just about survival, right? So I think what's really happening, as I said, is that men develop this response in order to be able to survive far from camp, essentially, be able to stay on their feet, even if they felt miserable. Even if they may not have even been participating in the hunting because they were sick, but they were at least able to stick with the hunting party in order to survive. Because being out on your own in the wilderness in hunter-gatherer days would probably kill you.
Yeah.
So, whereas women could feel sick, return to camp, maybe they'd be flat on their back for a couple of days and then they get over it. But anyway, this is my hypothesis. I've never heard anybody else propose this, but I've put this out there and I've suggested this to geneticists a few times. So maybe somebody will study this, and I'd be really interested to hear if anybody studied it. I'd be really interested to hear of any data. But as I said, it does again speak to the misandry, casual misandry, because people have tried to say that men being sick for longer meant that their immune systems don't work as well. I think they just work differently. And I think nature isn't passing a value judgment. It's just saying this is what's optimized for this particular set of circumstances.
Yes.
And this would of course play into this idea too that men don't take as many sick days too, because if a man is feeling less unwell for longer, he'll go to work and not take the day off because he's not that sick. Whereas a woman may well become more sick and have to take the day off. So anyway, so that's my hypothesis. If
Mhm.
there's any geneticists listening who decide to do a research study on this, I'd love it if you did that. I'd love to hear some hard data on this.
Right.
Um, anyway, yeah. So man flu, another example of misandry, of casual misandry. A lot of people kind of turn this one into a bit of a joke. I don't really like to joke about it. I'd rather see the term go away because men already don't go to the doctor enough.
Mhm.
And I think the last thing we should be doing is shaming men for feeling sick and wanting to go to the doctor, wanting to take some time off work to go to the
Mhm.
doctor. So I've
Yeah.
even heard an insurance company here in Australia run an ad saying that, which I thought was fantastic. They actually ran an ad saying, "Don't shame men with man flu because it'll discourage them from going to the doctor." Obviously, the insurance company was looking after their own bottom line because it's
Well,
better if
yeah.
the men go to the doctor, right, and
Mhm.
don't go and die,
Yeah.
or end up with time off work. So, but it was a good message that they were setting out. Unfortunately, I don't recall the name of the insurance company. I did try looking for it a couple of years ago. Anyway, but I'm glad to hear that at least one insurance company,
Yeah.
excuse me, did this. Men are immature, childlike, and emotionally stunted. This is one I'll probably pass over and talk about maybe a little bit more on another time. But a good
Yeah.
example of this, and I just quoted something here. Men have two emotions, hungry and horny. If you see him without an erection, make him a sandwich. Well, that's dehumanizing, really, and I don't find it
Of course,
funny,
yeah.
even
Hmm.
remotely. So,
Right.
men don't ask for directions. This is a strange one because there's really no research, as far as I'm aware, to support this.
Yeah,
And
it
what
just comes out
research
of
has
nowhere. Yeah, it
it
comes out of
does.
nowhere.
What
Yeah.
little research has been done, including by the Mythbusters, tends to suggest that men actually do ask for directions
Yeah.
about as much as women. Um, to the extent, personally, in fact, first time I even heard of this, I was with my then girlfriend when I was 20, and we were kind of lost in a part of Brisbane that I didn't know, and so I walked
Hmm.
into a what you call we call a service station or you call a gas station, and I asked for directions, and my girlfriend went really quiet. And I looked at her and said, "What?" And she said, "You asked for directions." I said, "Well, yeah, we're lost." So that's.
Yeah.
And she said, I'm stunned. I'm like, "Why?" And this is the first time I'd ever heard of it when I was 20. Anyway,
Hmm.
to the extent that I haven't asked for directions, it's only been because a fair proportion of the directions I've ever received have been terrible.
Hmm.
So if I would much rather read a map, but if
Hmm.
I'm lacking a map for any reason, I will indeed ask for directions. But please give
Right.
me a map if you can. Yeah.
Hmm.
Men speak condescendingly to women, mansplaining. So this will be a good one to talk about later. But we actually know exactly where this one came from.
Hmm. Yeah, so we've been condescended this whole list so far, and then we're the condescending ones. So,
Exactly, quite
yeah.
right. Men aren't as efficient or effective workers. Well, there's some data to suggest that maybe the reverse is true. So anyway, that would be a good one to study on a future occasion.
Yeah.
Um, Men are lazy. So again, this is, I guess, somewhat related to the last one. Uh, and yeah, I've got some counter examples there to talk about. So anyway, there's a few examples of
Hmm.
casual misandry, which, as I
Hmm.
said, aren't on their own. They're not killing anybody, right? But
Hmm.
they add up to a more serious problem, and they contribute to attacks on men's self-esteem.
Hmm.
And I consider casual misandry, along with the historical feminist historical narrative, to be two areas that I really try to talk about quite a bit because they underlie a lot of other problems.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that's all I had on misandry.
Yeah.
Uh, Next one I've got is Grokipedia.
All right. Yeah, because we've been talking a lot about social media and like sources in which the sources kind of get things either egregiously wrong or are biased, and we don't really know much about Grokipedia going in. We just heard announcements. As some of you may know, and based on what it sounds like, it seems like an Elon Musk effort and associated with X, with the Grok and everything like that. So my understanding is it's probably going to be at least somewhat AI generated articles, I think, but it is
Yes.
designed to kind of counteract the woke narrative that's happening in places like Wikipedia and such. I guess all we got to talk about right now is our implications here. Like, if you had any
Yeah.
thoughts on that.
Well, I was just going to give a quick summary of what I think
Yeah.
I agree broadly on what. So I think it'll be a fork of Wikipedia. I
Hmm.
can't remember if he specifically said that in the announcement, Elon Musk, but a fork in the open source world, a fork is where you take a copy of the code or whatever, and you essentially go in a different direction with it.
Hmm.
Usually, it has to go under the same license. Not always, but usually.
Hmm.
In this case, Wikipedia is under CC by SA, which is a type of Creative Commons license that requires anybody can take a copy of it or take a copy of any information in it, but you have to provide attribution and you must release the information under the same license, CC by SA. So Wiki for Men often takes articles from Wikipedia and removes the misandry and woke bias. And all articles in Wiki for Men are also under CC by SA. So theoretically, Wikipedia could take an article from Wiki for Men. I think Wikimania has actually taken a couple of articles from Wiki for Men,
Hmm.
which again is under CC by SA. So I'm a big believer and I'm a long time supporter of free and open source software and Creative Commons One of my great fears is that this information will get locked up in the hands. Information essentially will get locked up in
Right.
the hands of powerful entities versus, being. I'm more in favor of democratization of information.
Mm.
So I'm actually a Wikipedia. I've actually been a Wikipedia editor for over 20 years. So I've personally experienced seen these problems on Wikipedia and other problems as well. And I've been a Wikipedia editor for so long because I've been interested in things like Creative Commons licenses and so forth.
Hmm.
So
Right.
and I've seen the woke bias, and you can't. It's really too strong in a lot of cases to fix. A classic example being Zoe McLellan. The Zoe McLellan article does not mention that she is wanted by the authorities, and yet I would say that's a pretty important and relevant piece of information to put in an article
Hmm.
for anybody.
Yeah.
So I and others have tried to get into the article, and we've completely failed, except for a few weeks where one of the main people who was guarding the article, preventing this information going in, took a holiday, and the information was added in by somebody else, not me, and it was in there for several weeks. Then he came back for his holiday, immediately got rid of it again. But it
Hmm.
shows that there are these gatekeepers of information,
Hmm.
and I've encountered them. They're very frustrating to deal with, and unfortunately, they cause more moderate people to quit the Wikipedia project, as
Hmm.
they really are very frustrating to deal with. Anyway, so the idea behind Grokipedia will be, I think, yeah, as you say, AI generator. Essentially, AI take the uh, would would take the articles. I suspect there may be original articles too, but it'll take the
Hmm.
articles from Wikipedia, fix them. Now, we may take some Grokipedia articles into Wikipedia Wiki for Men, given as long as they are under CC by SA, which I would expect to be the case, given I can't really see how else that would work.
Hmm.
Um, I've actually been playing with the idea of generating AI generating articles on Wiki for Men for a while, but what I wanted to do was train the AI off Wiki for Men itself and a Voice for Men and a small number of other sites
Yeah.
for various reasons, including a lack of suitable software, a lack of time on my part. I haven't done that yet, but I
Hmm.
still wanted to try that, even with Grokipedia. I still want to actually try this for Wiki for Me, and I think it could be really useful. Um, I have concerns about the current application of AI because of ignoring authorship and so forth, which it's getting better, and there's some legal action against some AI actually in relation to this. You can't just treat information as your own because you find it online, for example. So some AIs have tended to do that, and so anyway, yeah, they really need to give attribution and publish the information in accordance with the licensing terms. So as
Right.
long as they're doing that, I'm quite happy to use the information, even if not exactly, maybe use it as a base and modify it, which we're free to do
Hmm.
as well. So
Right. Yeah.
anyway, I think that's all I had to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all I had to say on Grokipedia.
Mhm. Yeah, it should be interesting to once it kind of starts up, it'll be interesting to know what opinions you'll have and the issues we cover, and we could do some comparison contrast. So it'll be good subject
Exactly.
matter for our show here. And
Yep.
let's I would say we could use this as a good opportunity to have Wiki for Man as a bit of a competitor, as it were, for with Grokipedia, and see how we kind of measure up to each other and
Yeah, exactly. That's right. That's right. And who knows? I mean, I would love nothing more than if they used it for training data. That would be
Mhm.
great.
Yeah.
And because it's under CC and anything you take from it would be CC as well. So,
Hmm.
and this democratizes information. You're free then to take that information, modify it, publish it yourself, as long as you. And there's absolutely nothing. There's nothing stopping you. And this is something a lot of people don't understand too. With something like most Creative Commons licenses
Hmm.
and a lot of open source software too. There's actually no prohibition on selling it.
Hmm.
What keeps it free is market forces. So as long as somebody's willing to give it away, then it
Hmm.
doesn't really make sense to sell it. However, having said that, there's absolutely nothing wrong with, for example, taking some information that's under a suitable Creative Commons license, publishing it in a book, and charging
Yeah,
the,
of
the
course.
people may see value in the book,
Hmm.
and so therefore it's okay
Right.
people may buy it because it's a book and because they find that format valuable, right?
Hmm.
So, I mean, the Linux kernel, for example, I mean, I can sell you a copy of the Linux kernel for $1,000, perfectly legitimate. Linux is free. and open source. Free meaning you're not restricted in what you do with it, but it's also free in the sense that you can get it from anywhere for no cost because market forces keep the price at zero. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with me selling selling the Linux kernel for $1,000.
Right.
So
Hmm.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's all I got on that
Uh,
one. So,
Good. And Zoe McLellan is the
mhm.
final one I have, unless you have any other topics to discuss.
Nope. Nope. We've
And
covered quite a lot of ground today.
I
So,
think we exactly have, and I think we've been going somewhere, well, a bit over an hour actually,
oh
so
yeah,
maybe a
yeah,
little
well
longer
over
than
an
that.
hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, Zoe McLellan, as of October 2025, a warrant is outstanding for the arrest of Zoe McLellan in relation to charges of kidnapping, child stealing, and child custody deprivation. McLellan is a public figure who has appeared in numerous popular television shows, including Star Trek Voyager, JAG, NCIS New Orleans, and Designated Survivor. Her face is familiar to millions. It is extraordinary that she has evaded detection for so long. McLellan was reportedly residing in an apartment in River Ridge, Louisiana in April 2021 and may still be residing in the area. McLellan grew up in the area of Port Orchard, Washington State, and may have returned to the area. Some sources believe that McLellan has left the United States and is residing in Canada or Costa Rica. Prior to disappearing, McLellan was known to use the alias Sarah Chandler. Anyone with any relevant information should contact the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office. Thank you.
Yep. All right. Have a good one, Robert.
See you in a couple of weeks.
Yes.